Now we come to Shalmaneser III. Shalmaneser III, the son of Ashur-nasir-pal, conducted 32 campaigns in 35 years of his reign. Two of his monuments, now in the British Museum, are particularly noteworthy. The black obelisk on which Yehu, king of Israel, is depicted kissing Shalmaneser's feet, and the plaques of hammered bronze known as the Gates of Balawat. In the middle of the 8th century, Tiglat-Pileser III reigned 745 to 727 BCE. He established a permanent army. The peoples he conquered were deported and resettled within Assyria's domain in order to break their national consciousness and cohesion. He made himself the ruler of Babylon. Now, Sargon II extended Assyrian domination in all directions, from southern Anatolia to the Persian Gulf. At the beginning of his reign, he deported the population of Israel, which Shalmaneser V had conquered shortly before his death. Towards the end of his reign, Sargon II built a city, a new city, Dur Sharukin, remember, or Khorsabad in today's Iran, to the north of Nineveh, erected his palace astride its city wall and adorned it with impressive low reliefs. He also established a library at Nineveh. An Assyrian king, as we said before, Ashurbanipal, boasted of stocking libraries with copies of literary documents, social and family life, marriage, customs, and property laws, also collection of court documents and legal records, penalties provided for offenders, prayers, hymns, poetry, love letters, and more. Ashur and Marduk was worshipped as gods. The major cultural contribution of the Assyrian lay in the field of art and architecture. Ashurbanipal reigned 669 and 627 BCE, last great ruler of Assyria. Assyrian literature and art reached their apogees during his reign. He was one of the few ancient Middle Eastern rulers who was literate, and his scribes assembled the earliest wide-ranging library in that area. Like Sargon II, his royal residence, especially at Nineveh, were decorated with magnificent reliefs depicting scenes of war, wild animal hunts, and daily life in the palace. Apart from his fame as a conqueror, Ashurbanipal is noted for the vast library he created in his palace at Nineveh, and we repeat again, and Dur Sharukin, Khorsabad, Iran. Now we mentioned Dur Sharukin, Khorsabad, Arameans. Now I start with Khorsabad. What is this Khorsabad? Why is it so important? There is a name of a town called Musasir, Armenian town from Urartu. In 1843, an archaeological team under the leadership of Paul-Émile Botta and sponsored by the French government excavated a large mound in Khorsabad, about 15 miles north of Nineveh. At this site, the first of the Assyrian palaces was to be discovered, the one Ashurbanipal and Sargon built. And covering an entire city within walls a mile long. A monumental palace was built by Sargon II, who ruled from 721 to 705 BCE on a scale never till then attempted by any Assyrian monarch. This splendid structure was Dur Sharukin, or Sargon's fortress. The result of Botta's excavations were published in a sumptuous edition with ample funds provided by the French government, and now an expensive rarity in the Louvre Museum. Many antiquities and accurate drawings of wall sculptures were apportioned between the British Museum and the Louvre Museum. However, a bas-relief destined for Paris, forming part of an ill-started convoy of antiquities, was attacked by Arab robbers while being shipped down the Tigris River, and today they lie somewhere in the bed of that river. Fortunately, that particular bas-relief was copied at its original location in the palace onto a drawing by Eugène Flondet, Botta's chief artist. Now we come to that famous city called Musasir. Now, during this period of Assyrian campaign, Musasir was the spiritual center of Urartu, Armenia, where the temple of the god Haldi or Khaldi was built and worshipped, similar to Jerusalem and the temple of Solomon. The Louvre text tells us the following. We gather from the Louvre texts that in the summer of 714 BCE, Sargon II attacked Musasir. King Rusa of Urartu and his retinue fled into the mountains, leaving the victorious Assyrians to overrun the city and capture the palace and its storerooms filled with immense treasures. Sargon then entered the temple of the god Haldi or Khaldi, where even greater beauty was found. The list of valuables has been catalogued in the Louvre text, and it defies imagination and comprehension. It is sufficient to state that King Rusa had assembled the greater part of the treasures of Urartu in Musasir for safekeeping. Indeed, the treasures of the Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun pales into insignificance when compared with the fantastic wealth that Sargon carried back to Assyria to record in text and bas-relief in the capital of Ashur and the palace of Dur Sharukin. Fortunately, the inscriptions on and wall paintings of Sargon II have preserved for us the nature of the high culture of Armenia Urartu, which otherwise would have been never seen the light of day. It has been stated that when Warusha, king of Urartu, learned of the destruction and pillaging of Musasir and the abduction of his god Haldi, committed suicide. End of Musasir's story. Now we come to languages. Aramean. We're talking about Aramean. What is this Aramean language? These highly mobile competitive tribesmen, with their sudden raids, were a continued threat in the early 14th century BCE, 1300 and something BCE. Much of Israel was under Aramean rule for 8 years. Other entities mentioned in the Hebrew Bible include Aram Damascus and Aram Rehob. The Arameans are first mentioned in the Tel al-Amarna letters. Tel al-Amarna, I must explain this. Tel al-Amarna was the new capital that the Pharaoh Akhenaton built because he moved the Egyptian capital city from Thebes to Tel al-Amarna because he started worshipping one God. He was the first monotheist monarch ever to worship one God, Aton. And he built his temple and his palace, which was also destroyed. There were letters sent here and there to Babylonia and the Hittites and backwards and forwards. And this is where Aram is mentioned in Tel al-Amarna letters. That's where Tel al-Amarna is, Egypt. I visited Tel al-Amarna. The origin of the Arameans is still uncertain. An inscription of Naram Sin of Akkad, 2250 BCE, provides the earlier reference to Aram as a place name. Other early references to a place or people of Aram have appeared at the archives of Mari and Ugarit. Remember, we mentioned Ugarit. The Assyrian Empire resorted to a policy of deporting conquered peoples into the land of Mesopotamia and in turn settling Assyrian colonists in newly conquered lands. By the 6th century, the many peoples in Mesopotamia spoke many languages, most of which were a derivative of Aramaic, and gradually became the main language spoken by the Assyrian. Inscriptional Pahlavi text from Shapur III is derived from the Aramaic script. Following conquest of Assyria under Darius I, the Aramaic language was adopted as the vehicle for writing communications between the different regions of the vast empire with its different peoples and languages. That's why when I mentioned Bahistun, the carving on the face of a mountain 300 feet high, it was written in 3 different languages, but one script, Aramaic, but 3 different languages. Because Aramaic, they could read Aramaic letters. It greatly contributed to the astonishing success of the Achaemenids in holding their far-flung empire together for as long as they did. Aramaic was the lingua franca of the Achaemenid territories. Lingua franca means the important language, the most used language. Like today, the lingua franca is English because emails, SMSs, most of the news comes in English. Aramaic vocabulary would survive as the essential characteristics of the Pahlavi writing system. Aramaic is a group of Semitic languages with a 5,000 years history. It has been the language of administration of empires and the language of divine worship. It is the original language of large sections of the biblical books of Daniel and Ezra. The first language of the Middle East and is the main language of the Babylonian Jewish Talmud. Aramaic is a part of the Northwest Semitic group of languages, which also includes the Canaanite language, such as Hebrew. It is also related to Arabic, being part of the more diverse Central Semitic languages. This is the writing system used in Biblical Aramaic and other Jewish writings. In the New Testament of the Bible, in Matthew 27:47, it says, And Jesus cried with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. God, God, why did you forsake me? That was in Aramaic. If I say the same things in Arabic, it would sound like this. Allah, Allah, le septeni. Very similar to Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. Very similar languages. That was in Aramaic, being the spoken language of Jesus and his disciples. One of the largest collection of imperial Aramaic text is that of the Persepolis fortifications tablets in Iran, which number about 500. Of them, the best known is the Wisdom of Ahikar, a book of instructive aphorism quite similar in style to the biblical book of Proverbs. It was not until Greek emerged several centuries later that Aramaic lost its prestige as the most sophisticated language until the Arab invasion about 7th century of our era. The Bible tells us that Saul, David, and Solomon, late 11th and 10th centuries, fought against the Aramean kingdoms across the northern frontiers of Israel. It appears from inscriptions as well as from names that Arameans worship Samero-Akkadian and Canaanite gods, Canaanites, gods, such as Hadad, the storm god, El, the supreme god, Elohim, El, was from Canaan, Sin, and Ishtar, the Ishtar gate, remember? Whom they called Atar, the Phoenician goddess Anat, and others. So most of the gods that were worshipped came from Canaanite religions. Now, what is this Canaanite language? A little bit we talk about this Canaanite language. Canaanite, a group of Semitic languages of ancient Syria and Palestine, including Hebrew, Phoenician, and other closely related dialects. Canaanite was the language of the ancient land of Moab. Remember, the great-grandmother of King David, Ruth, was a Moabite in the Old Testament. Now part of Jordan. Moab is part of Jordan. The Moabite stone, a block of black basalt found in Jordan in 1868, bears an inscription on clause to Hebrew that it can be interpreted on the basis of an Old Testament grammar and lexicon. The earliest evidence of Canaanite dialects is shown in Canaanitic words inserted into the Babylonian tablets, again found in Tel El Amarna in Egypt, and also in the Ugarit documents of the Tel El Amarna period, dating from nearly 14th century BC. Thank you.